Salam, everybody, once again to yet another epic edition of the African history. A journey that we are undertaking towards a united global community. We review the history of Africans and the interactions with the Europeans and the rest of the world. And we are so elated because we have begun our first chapter on education. We are focusing on a context experience between Karing'a University and the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And so we continue with the journey of our dear friend Mahmoud, who looked at the issues, and he was given a rebuttal by one of the former Dar es Salaam University lecturers, Walter Rodney. And so last time we left at when a propaganda magazine was developed by the name Cheche. And this was a reaction from interdisciplinary meeting, which took views from students on how to best to improve a university that was degenerating from a university to a national political tool with the aim of solving local problems other than looking at the global issues and thinking local, that is global and local. And so Cheche did not live probably to its vision and purpose, and so it was banned, but it was relaunched again as Maji Maji, an inspiration from the Maji Maji liberation movement of Tanzania. And so again, this shows that the discontent of African students on the quote-unquote in the African independence. So nothing changed, it's only the monkeys who changed, but the field and the forest and the trees remained the same. Just like the case of our national elections, where now the forest changes, but the monkeys remain the same. These are sycophants of colonial power and big auctioneers of the African dignity, of their fellow African dignities. And so Cheche is relaunched by the activist students, and it looked at student issues, it looked at the academic staff issues, because at some point, like I said, a lot of lecturers wanted to be elevated to positions in the administration and management, and so they also found solace in this magazine. And so they used to have discussions every Sunday at 10 a.m. And this was also another reaction against the against Christianity, because, like I said, and like Hamoud had really observed, Christianity was a tool of both slavery and colonialism. And so they stopped going to church, and they chose to be discussing their real issues other than how to go to heaven, and listening to somebody who knows the route to heaven, but they have never been there. And so this was the constructive criticism, and I think it will only have been a balanced argument if the church people had a response on this. But sometimes some of these engagements are seen as useless and not beneficial especially when um, profession and careers are threatened by existential questions that are very difficult uh, to answer. And so we continue with the journey of the universities. At some point in 1980s, these universities became broke. This was as a result of a designed mechanism by the colonialists to give the quote unquote independence to Africans and watch how they are going to mess up their own countries because they don't understand this system, they don't understand the geopolitics, they don't understand the markets, they don't understand all this information. And so it became a designed system of failure. And so universities were hard hit, some countries were hard hit, and this is where IMF was created for. And so IMF found a purpose, and this is the rise of America. And so the financial crisis that led to most African university to be bailed from the Bretton Woods institution, and they were put under management of an international bank like IMF. For example, IMF took over Makerere and they did structural adjustments and came up with a totally different model of a university. In these also Bretton Woods institution was also responsible for this, and IMF also took charge of the Ugandan government and especially one of the most important docket, that of the treasury. And so World Bank ran Makerere University, and they came up with 3 reforms. Again, the student reforms, and now that were done in the Dar es Salaam University, and now we are looking at World Bank coming with their own version of reforms for the Makerere University. And so one of the reforms was the school fees was to be paid by individuals. All right, and there were no university benefits anymore. And so the issue of school fees came up. And this, I think, was one of the pertinent issues that Mohamud was raising. The other thing was that the university was to run autonomous disciplinary departments, and there was a centralized administration, and students were only allowed once they paid in school, once they paid 80% of their school fees. So this again changed the accessibility of education by Africans. And so the third issue was looked at was the curriculum. And the curriculum was said that it was being restructured to become market friendly. And so this market friendly thing, because Africans do not understand market, and so you will find some radical changes that happened in Makerere, which I attribute these radical changes to the failure and the degenerating of Makerere University as a reputable university. You'll find like the geography department began a BA program in tourism and linguistics. This is how to understand the market. And they also added, for the purposes of the department, cashing in a BA in secretariat. And this meant that university now moved from becoming institutions into, and now they became a financial institution, from being an academic and a social development institution. Um, and so a lot of students dropped out from school. This was part of the big plan of causing anarchy in the post-independent Africa, and so it started to bear fruits because there was very little or minimal relationship between the African experience in the community, and the history, and of course the inspiration. There was no relationship. So this breaking down of the African society came through these models that were brought by the university. And so in these, the intellectuals of Africa became enemies of the community, because it was a question of, you can afford good education, and so you have a chance of making it in life, but for us, we can't, and so we shall be your subjects. And so it brought a class system which was never there in Africa before. So there was the issue of language that had been proposed by Muhammad, and there was the issue of francophones and anglophones in our universities, and it was difficult for an exchange program within Africa, and so everybody wanted to go abroad, and so people perfected English and French, and it was almost like they wanted them to become their original language, but unfortunately that was not the case. Though we have to applaud Africans, because most of them going out there, having 4 to 3 or 2 languages that we're supposed to know, and you're still good in your colonial national language. It is something to laud, and also be successful in your academics in a culture shocking environment. So this is a very important thing to note, that despite all these challenges, we still have something to offer. The East Africa Swahili, like I said in our last several episodes, was now ratified by the AU to be used in business, because a lot of people, even in outside Africa, are studying Swahili in their universities, and so it is becoming a very simple language, lingua franca, that is going to unify Africa and also improve on the intra-African trade. And so Swahili was preferred some years back. In fact, Ali Mazrui was one of the proponents of Swahili to be used in universities, or to be studied as one of the university common courses across Africa, so that at least we can improve even our relationship and our understanding. So in East Africa, it was proposed, it was accepted, but only in primary level and secondary level. But in tertiary level, it was an option. And so there was also the issue of the Afrikaans, who were thought to be the lowly Dutch in the kitchens. He takes an example of the medium of vigorous intellectual tradition in a country where there were minorities in 1948, and they also fueled apartheid. But the Dutch kitchen guys moved were able to move from kitchen to becoming lecturers, to becoming lawyers, to becoming scientists and journalists. And they also developed magazines and publish houses. So the universities can really do a lot. And especially another example is given is the University of Stellenbosch and the Pretoria, which were inclusive in South Africa. So this is one of the most successful stories of African universities that really did help in decolonizing Africa. So the universities have always largely remained colonial tools until today. And that's why in Kenya there is a discourse, a national discourse of how university are going to transition to CBC. And so to me, these are proponents of this colonial, they are beneficiaries of this colonial mentality and colonial structures and systems. And so I would wish that we would look more on what really works for Africa and looking at the global market, which we must admit that it is very far from our control, but we can at least continue the struggle for mainstreaming Africans in the global arena. So thank you so much. We appreciate this. We are going to continue from there next time and continue to fight for your space in the history of the world as an African. Thank you and shukran.